Hello everyone, and welcome to our presentation. Today we will be discussing how pain is articulated in Audre Lorde's The Cancer Journals, and to what effect the articulation of pain has on shared empowerment. You might realize in our presentation that pain can be articulated through various modes, including writing, vocalizations, dialogue with others, and through community. To provide some structure on how our presentation will be going today, I just wanted to mention that I will be presenting our central question and themes. Catherine will then provide us with some biographical information on Audre Lorde, and Stephanie will then go over our theoretical framework. As you can see, Catherine will then take over again for Theme 1, Stephanie will analyze Theme 2, and I will finish up with Theme 3 before Catherine gives us our conclusion. Our central question is, how is Lorde's articulation of pain a form of sharing empowerment for women who experience breast cancer and the process of treatment? The first theme, which will be analyzed by Catherine, is the articulation of pain as an outcry. This entails the process of not only verbalizing pain, but vocalizing pain, and the process of treatment for breast cancer in a medical setting. Stephanie will be exploring the articulation of pain as a shared communal experience, or basically asking the question of to what extent is it empowering for an individual with an illness to share their pain and experience with other individuals in the same situation. I will then comment on the articulation of pain as empowering because it becomes a tool for healing for the self and others. Perhaps not physically healing, but psychologically healing.
Audre Lorde, self-proclaimed black, lesbian, feminist, poet, warrior, mother, was born on the 18th of February 1934 and had difficulties in early childhood with speaking and expressing herself, later using poetry to do so. She was not only a poet, but a feminist, a civil and human rights activist, an essayist, and a professor. Her work explored political, racial, and class issues alongside homophobia as part of her intersectional feminist outlook. From 1979 onwards, her works also featured insights into her battles with breast and liver cancer, and how they came to affect her philosophies on mortality, community between women cancer survivors, and the problems with the medical industry. She was one of the co-founders of the Kitchen Table Press, a publisher formed to give women of colour a voice, something Lorde and other intersectional feminists had fought to gain when faced with opposition from white feminists who controlled the major feminist periodicals of the 1970s and who generally overlooked racial issues. One of their manifestos stated that their work is both cultural and political, connected to the struggles for freedom of all our peoples. We hope to serve as a communication network for women of colour in the US and around the world. They published work that consciously examines, from a positive and original perspective, the specific situations and issues that women of colour face. The publishing of the Cancer Journals by Lorde and the co-founding of the Kitchen Table Press in 1980 does, I think, influence the two ideas of the communication network and for original perspectives of women of colour. Lorde emphasises in the Cancer Journals the need for building communities between women who share the experience of breast cancer and mastectomies, and the fact that one cannot remain silent in the face of unjust treatment by the medical system. The Kitchen Table Press exemplifies the need for breaking through imposed silences, especially by women of colour. In regards to this case study, Lorde stated in an interview that the function of art is to provide empowerment, and her way of doing so was through her words. This brings me to this point. Early in the Cancer Journals, Lorde says, "I am a post-mastectomy woman who believes our feelings need voice in order to be recognised, respected, and of use." The Cancer Journals is an autobiographical illness narrative and a work of prose. Her articulation of illness experience combines poetic and metaphorical language with diary entries written as she experienced pain of all kinds, along with a section devoted to her essay and speech on the nature of silence and why women should not be silent. Lorde's articulation of pain in the Cancer Journals is in an effort to empower both herself and other women, for her voice to be heard and for other people to learn what her perspective on the effects of illness did to her philosophies. That she said her words of poetry were meant to empower, so too her words conveying her experience of breast cancer. It is how and for what purpose she articulates pain in order to empower other women, and herself, that we will be looking into for this study.
For our theoretical framework, we chose these two sources by Sakalis and Ibid, and we chose them because they tell us that there is more to an illness and more to pain than medical definitions and medical accounts. Behind each cancer patient, behind each chronic pain sufferer, is a person who has a past, a present, and a future. They have a family and friends, and they have hopes and fears. However, when each person is diagnosed, their world is changed forever. They are no longer a person, but a number, another patient, and their experience can only be understood and known by other patients and other sufferers. But illness narratives give a chance for their pain to be articulated, and that is what we have explored through articulation of pain as an outcry, articulation of pain as a shared experience, and articulation of pain as healing for self and others.
I will now focus on the articulation of pain as an outcry that strives for empowerment. Firstly, there are the segments in the narrative after her biopsy and mastectomy where Lorde does not verbally articulate her pain. She cannot, but she can vocalise them loudly and violently. Intense and sudden outcries of pain create discomfort for the nurses who want her silent to keep other patients comfortable and calm the situation down. Lorde says, "I yelled and screamed and complained about the cold and begged for extra blankets, but none came. The nurses were very put out by my ruckus and sent me back to the floor early." And, "I remember screaming and cursing with pain in the recovery room, and I remember a disgusted nurse giving me a shot. I remember a voice telling me to be quiet because there were sick people here, and my saying, well, I have a right because I'm sick too." These passages struck me in particular because in all other moments where Lorde verbally articulates her pain, whether to the unseen reader of her narrative or to her friends, family, and support network, there is always an expression of empathy with her. In this case, in the moments where the pain and discomfort are too much, and all she can do is to vocalise her pain through screams. The reactions of the nurses, which I have underlined, written by Lorde in a very interesting way. She attributes feelings to the nurses, like disgust, that immediately place herself and the reader in opposition to the nurses, who take on the role of antagonist. That Lorde alludes to the hospital space as infantilizing at multiple points in the narrative also explains the description of the nurse's behaviour. In the first quote, of being very put out and who sent me back early. Lorde, who prides herself on her strength, is reduced in these moments by both the pain and the agents of the medical system to the role of a child, disempowered and voiceless. The voice, who, interestingly, Lorde cannot recall the identity of, telling her to be quiet due to the presence of other sick people, may have been a nurse, or it may have been herself. There are multiple instances in the narrative of Lorde alluding to the many voices all competing for precedence in her head. That she refuses to let her illness define her completely, but for it to just become a part of her new, redefined identity, may have at that moment been a moment of confusion or denial over whether or not she counted as a sick person. Of course, that this is all immediately taking place after the biopsy and mastectomy, and that these are the reactions of the nurses, immediately puts a bias within the narrative and the reader against the healthcare system, who allow no time or space within which to weep, rage, internalise, and transcend Lorde's own loss. It is regarding this that I bring in some points on the role of the nurses. Between Lord and the medical staff, there is an ontologically consequential divide, which, in other terms, is a deep mutual misunderstanding, making it difficult for the quarrelling parties to recognise the terms of their difference. This is according to Mattingly. Arthur Frank expands on this, noting that Lord is deeply committed to her body as a self-directed expression of political commitments. The nurse is equally deeply committed to a body that exists to sustain the functioning order of the clinic, including the needs for emotional containment in situations where emotions threaten to become overwhelming. In this case, the misunderstanding forms where the nurses are just doing their jobs, trying to create an environment suitable for the comfort of all patients in the wards, not just Lord. However, for Lord, this moment of vocal anguish is necessary for her, one of the vital steps to come to terms with her new body and the pain currently invading it. Lord's body is political, and what she does with it and how she expresses her body's appearance and its meanings to the world are a part of her feminist activism. For the nurses to enforce the silence on her that she fights so hard against makes sense as part of the medical institutional environment, but not to Lord. In contrast to how the medical system removes the personhood of an individual in favour of patient, Lord flips the roles and instead makes the nurses the nameless ones, the artificial persons who embody the moral authority acting to disempower her in moments when she can only vocalise and not articulate her pain. Now I want to discuss outcries of defiance in the articulation of pain as a form of empowerment. Lord was outspoken in her brand of feminism, which explored her identity as a proud black lesbian. This plays a major role in the cancer journals, when Lord's mastectomy disrupts the stability of her identity. For Lord, the interplay between illness, death, grief, and sexuality has been present for a large portion of her life, exemplified in her account of Eudora Garrett, who she says was the first woman who totally engaged me in our loving. I remember the hesitation and tenderness I felt as I touched the deeply scarred hollow under her right shoulder and across her chest. The night she finally shared the last pain of her mastectomy with me in the clear, heavy heat of our Mexican spring. I was 19 and she was 47. Now I am 44 and she is dead. For Lord, the presence of the very illness she experiences in the cancer journals on the body of Garrett does not affect her sexual experience, nor her identity. It is only after her own mastectomy that she starts to reevaluate her relationship with Francis and her own body. She says, "I was thinking, what is it like to be making love to a woman and have only one breast brushing against hers? I thought, how will we fit so perfectly together ever again? I thought, I wonder if our lovemaking had anything to do with it. I thought, what will it be like making love to me? Will she still find my body delicious?" And for the first time, deeply and fleetingly, a groundswell of sadness rolled up over me that filled my mouth and eyes almost to drowning. My right breast represented such an area of feeling and pleasure for me. How could I bear never to feel that again? She thinks this to herself in response to the well-meaning but ultimately misguided attempts at help by the Reach for Recovery woman. The disruption to her identity is at first disempowering. She felt betrayed by her right breast for a period of time, and now the area of her body that represented lesbian pleasure in particular was gone completely.